Well, I'm delighted to be here tonight to present to all of you, both those of you sitting there, um, in your meeting room, and those of you that are all connecting from around the map. It's always exciting to talk to fellow plant enthusiasts. So, welcome to all of you, and I'm glad to be able to take you on this tour that starts at the soil surface and goes down and down deep below and show you the things that have fascinated me for a long time. I actually have always loved looking at tiny little things, even microscopic things, since I was just really young. And I've always been fascinated with really old things. And somehow this whole desert underground story meshes both of those together. So that's exciting for me. One of the first things I started wondering about when I was really small, basically crawling around on my belly, like did for this shot that we have on the screen. It's a belly shot to see all the belly flowers. But I would pick up translucent quartz rocks and see that they were green underneath. And I asked everybody around me, what is this green stuff? And nobody seemed to know. When I finally got to college at UC Riverside, I asked some of my professors, what is this green? And some of them thought, well, it's probably some kind of what do you call it? A mineral. But I didn't think so because if I rubbed real hard, it all rubbed off. Well, fast forward to today. Now we know that algae grows underneath translucent rocks in the desert. But years and years ago, people just thought, algae in the desert? How could algae possibly grow in a place that's totally dry and hot? Well, now today we know that algae does grow under translucent rocks because they receive the sunlight they need, and because rocks, due to the fact that they shade the soil, actually wick water towards them and keep water there longer after rainstorms than the bare ground around it. So if you have a light and water, you're going to get algae. And so we know that now. Well, looking at other things around the desert soils, there are things that we didn't know about when I was growing up. And now we're uncovering more and more of those mysteries, and they're so fascinating. So that's where I want to take you all with me tonight. Oops. Uh-oh, what did I do wrong here? Oh, there we go. So if we were all standing, I could just plop you down pretty much anywhere in the desert and have you look around, and almost every plant around you would be older than you are. And many of them, possibly even most of those plants, would be older than your grandparents. And we don't actually think about that in the desert because the plants are not tall, towering redwoods. They're not huge plants. They look pretty small and they're fairly well spaced apart, but they are so old and they're creating a whole landscape of ancientness that is accomplishing really important and fascinating things. Some of the things that I am going to tell you tonight may kind of seem like science fiction, but everything here is bona fide science, and it's really as weird as some of it might sound. There's a lot of research going on now, some pretty fascinating stuff that will end up affecting our own lives here and our quality of life into the future. So now I'm going to start this tour for you, and we're going to start actually above ground right now. So first of all, when we're looking above ground, these fairly short plants that we see, you may not suspect are all that old, but you're probably all aware of king clone, that very, very old creosote clone in the Johnson Valley area that Dr. Frank Vasic discovered. And actually, it's really kind of fun because I was in Frank Vasic's office with my major professor was Dr. Hiram Johnson when they were looking at an aerial photo of that area. Was like from about 30,000 feet, and they saw these little rings on the the aerial photograph. And Dr. Vasic said, I think these are clones. We have to go out there and look at them. And he was so right. So the creosote bush clone that he studied with his grad student was Leo Sternberg, now a professor. They went out and did all kinds of stuff. That's a whole other exciting fun thing, because I got to go out with them too, about how they determined that that was actually one plant, with basically through chemical fingerprinting, by collecting leaves from all the different shrubs in the circle, grinding them up and putting them in a slurry that goes up of a gel chromatography plate. And if it's the same barcode for every plant, you've got the same plant. So it would, through all that kind of stuff and even more research on the roots and everything, determined that that one creosote clone is at least 10,000 years old, which dates back to the last ice age that we had here. So we don't know how much longer that plant can even grow. It's 11,000 years old about now. How much longer can that grow? Who knows? Across the desert landscape, though, king clone and the creosotes are not the only long-lived plant. Things like our California juniper can live very well upwards of 1,500 years, or possibly even more. Actually, probably there's some that we think are approaching 3,000 years based on Dr. Vasic's work. And even some of the small plants like our Mormon tea or California buckwheat, even some of our tortoise biologists that started doing work with Dr. Christine Berry at BLM, at the Bureau of Land Management, probably about 45 years ago, almost 50 years ago. They're seeing the same exact California buckwheat plants in their tortoise transects now as they did when they started in the 70s. So we know that these plants in the desert are so old, likely because it's so hard to start life in the desert. Every seed that germinates of a desert plant, their prime directive is to get their roots down deep enough the first summer that they can live through that first summer. Because even a creosote plant that can live for 11,000 years, if it doesn't get its root deep enough down to soil that may have had rain years before that, if it can't get that root down deep enough, it doesn't make it through the first summer, it's not even going to live for a year. So the episodes of enough rainfall that allow one of these desert plants to get even through that first summer are adaptations that allow them to grow many, many years, because who knows how long it's going to be before the next rain episode it is enough that it allows a plant to get established. So at any rate, across the desert, when you look across here, we see small plants. We think that there's it's just not that ancient of a landscape, and it's truly, truly ancient. So now when we move underground to look at the roots of those ancient plants above ground, the roots are going through an environment that is so complex, so interesting, so intricate, so many things going on. But one of the things that we can see, not just with a microscope, but with our bare eyes, if we could dig down there and see, is how deep all the roots of these plants are. These roots have to be deep to get down to soil moisture from rains that may have happened even 10, 15 years ago. The roots of some of our desert plants can go down to a depth of over 150 feet. And that would be like a honey mesquite. There are other plants like all the microphyll woodland plants that grow in the little dry washes, especially in the Sonoran Desert, like ironwood and palo verde, have excessively deep roots to get themselves through these droughts that can be many, many years. Some of the roots of those plants actually go all the way down to groundwater, and that's how they're staying alive. So the the biomass under the ground in the desert is probably almost equal to what's happening above ground when you look at the biomass of the deep roots underground. I just want to have a small explanation about the succulents, some of them depicted in this screen. That succulents like the Joshua tree, the Mojave yucca, and all the cacti, and even like rock live forever, which does seem like it lives forever, but those root systems are not excessively deep. They can go out an excessively long distance from the plant, but they're not as deep because they have a different system of collecting and storing water. And they can actually even grow rain roots right after rainfall that will grow out from the cactus or the succulents and absorb as much of the moisture from the soil as they can while the soil is still moist. And as that soil dries out, the rain roots shrivel up and die so that moisture is not taken from the plant, back to the roots when the soil dries out at that depth. So all the rain roots will die, and all that soil, all that moisture is captured and stored inside that succulent plant. But the rest of the plants do what you see depicted in this graphic, and that's have roots that can be from 3 to 10 to 12 times deeper than the plant is above ground. This is one of the reasons why it's so hard to transplant any desert plant. People ask me all the time, oh, I've got just a really short creosote. It's only about a foot tall. Can I transplant it? I say, well, at the very least, if it's only 10 times, the roots are only 10 times deeper than the plant is tall, you're going to have to dig down 10 feet. Are you willing to do that? You think about a plant that is, like a mature creosote can be maybe 15 up to even, 20 feet tall. The roots are so deep, you couldn't even excavate them out. So that's why it is so hard to transplant desert plants, but that's their secret for survival. So that's what's happening at the surface. Now, as we go down to the surface of the soil, there is a whole cast of characters living in that top couple centimeters, right where sunlight actually can penetrate into the soil. At that level, there is a community of microscopic algae and fungus and bacteria. In some cases, when the conditions are just right, you can also add mosses and liverworts into that living layer of soil. If we go down deeper, you see all these deep roots, going through the whole system, but there can be chunks or layers of a cemented type of soil called caliche that actually holds carbon underground. And we'll talk tonight about how that carbon gets from our air down there to the soil depths. So all of these desert plants and the soil microbes are actually working together to do so many wonderful things for their own community and for our own environment as well. The living soil microbes that are holding our soil, our desert soils together, are actually preventing dust storms for us, and that is a real benefit to our health. If all those microbes weren't there, we would have dust storms over the whole desert, and we would be breathing in anything that has been deposited on that soil, from combustion of cars and other things to what do you call it? The spores that cause valley fever and stuff like that. Going deeper, the roots, these deep roots underground, are both capturing and storing carbon in living systems, both as organic carbon and then even after they die as inorganic carbon. And I'll talk about how that happens as well. And then the carbon that is stored, inorganic carbon that is stored as caliche or calcium carbonate, can be stored underground for many thousands of years if we don't disturb the soil. Okay. So now we're going to get out our microscopes and take a closer look at this top layer of soil in the deserts, this living layer of soil. So many components of it, including the algae, fungus, bacteria, possibly even mosses and liverworts. But they're all basically in a state of suspended animation when the soil is dry. Nobody can really operate, move, photosynthesize, or fix nitrogen or anything when everything is dry. So they have to wait until rain. And I kind of liken this to Sleeping Beauty's castle under a spell. As long as it's dry, that whole soil surface is kind of under a suspended animation and can't really, you know, do all of their functions. But the minute it rains, and I mean within almost seconds after it rains, all of these cast of characters wake back up, start photosynthesizing, start making new tunnels through the soil, and are just it's like party time after a rain. So if you look at the left hand circle on your screen, that is a micrograph of desert soil grains, and the threads in between them are basically they're encased filaments of algae, and we used to call them blue-green algae. Now we call it cyanobacteria, but whatever you call it, there are these filaments that are these living algae, and they want to move through the soil, but the soil grains are so sharp that it would cut them as they tried to move through. So they exude a coating of a very sticky substance that is like a subway tunnel of goo all around them. And they produce that ahead of them, and then these filaments can keep moving through the soil, finding new nutrients to absorb, reproducing. And as they go through this soil, they are actually gluing the soil grains together. Even when everything dries out, the gooey tunnels actually glom onto all of those little particles of the grains of sand and hold everything together, unless someone walks on them, or a bike drives over them, or a car drives over them. That breaks all of these filaments up, and then basically unglues the particles of sand. And when that happens, that's when you get dust storms. And you can also then get an erosion across the soil that is not just a localized impact. As wind and water get into an area where the biotic crust, I didn't talk about the name of these. These living soils are known by a number of names that can be cryptogamic soil, microbiotic soil, biotic soil. Tonight I'll just call them biocrusts for short. So these biocrusts, when they are moist and you walk over them, they are pretty spongy and springy, and they can generally take that. But when they're dry and you walk on them repeatedly or drive over them, they're going to all break up. When they break up, especially, it's bad in a linear fashion, because then there is a long disturbance level where wind and water can get underneath them and basically roll them back like a carpet seam next to a door entry, and they'll just keep curling back farther and farther, and you can have a very big impact from even one tire track going across these. So this very microscopic glue is really holding so much of our desert soils together. When you do disturb our the biocrust, the surface of the soil in the desert, you can pretty much count on you're going to get dust storms, and really bad dust storms. So this is an actual picture that I took in the Yucca Valley area where they were building a hotel, actually, and you couldn't even hardly see the area where they had been blading. It's not just not fun to look at this, but these are health hazards when all of this dust goes into the air and we breathe it. There are what they call particulate matter, and the size of it is determined by microns. So PM10s, or particulate matter 10 microns, floating through the air, and that's the kind of stuff that makes you cough, and you can feel it on your teeth and everything. But also in that, there can be PM 2.5s, which are particulate matter that are 2.5 microns or less. That particulate matter is caused by combustion, and that can be from factories, it can be from cars, exhaust, wildfires. And when all of those particulate PM 2.5 settle in the ground, if we still have intact soils, that's where they stay. But as soon as we disturb the soil, it brings up all that stuff. And if we breathe it, it can cause lots of health hazards, like listed here: coughing, wheezing, bronchitis, asthma attacks, high blood pressure, heart attacks, strokes, premature death. And that's not even talking about valley fever spores. When you see pictures of dust storms in the desert, if you look closely at any picture, where the dust storm is only where the desert soil is disturbed. So along dirt roads, all of our industrial scale solar projects now, there are a couple of natural disturbed areas in the deserts where you can see dust during a storm where we haven't bladed it. And that is active river washes, like the Whitewater River, the San Gorgonio River drainage, and dry lake beds. But other than that, other than this, the dry river beds and the lakes, the dry lakes, you're not going to see all of this dust, all these dust storms happen in our deserts. So now I want to go down deeper to a relationship between these deep plant roots and special fungi that are in partnership with all of our plant roots. Now, by now, you guys are all plant people. You already know about mycorrhizal fungi. So I will still say a couple of things, even though I know you know about it, just to lay the groundwork so we all have the same terminology going into it. So fungus is fabulous at absorbing things. It's the best sponge in the world, but they can't make their own food. And plants make their own food, but they have a really hard time getting enough moisture and nutrients out of soils such as the deserts that are very low in organic matter, because there's not a lot of mulch to break down. They're low in nutrients and they're very low in moisture. So the plants can make the food, but have a hard time absorbing everything they need. And the fungus can absorb everything, but they can't make their food. So it's kind of like a logical conclusion. What would happen if those partners got together? They both benefit. So apparently, from what we surmise, fungi they wanted to actually climb out of the water, but they needed to combine with plants in order to spread out over the earth. So there has been this relationship for many hundreds of thousands of years of fungi either growing inside of plant roots or wrapping around plant roots and supplying more nutrients and water to the plant in exchange for the plant giving up some of its sugars for the fungus. So what this subterranean trade has been called is a subterranean swap meet, and that's pretty much what's happening underground. There is a continual swap meet happening for the benefit of all partners involved, and all of these fungi, all these fungal threads are attached to all these roots underground, and not just to one plant's roots, but one body of fungus can connect to many hundreds of plants, even for miles and miles, and to different species as well. And what that ends up doing is connecting all the plants that we see above the ground. They're actually all connected underground, and that is so cool. We know this from studies that have done where they have injected with like a hypodermic needle, labeled radioactive water like tritium into one plant, and then pulling the water with another needle out of a nearby plant, can be maybe 20 feet away, and seeing how long it takes for the radioactive water to get from one plant down to the roots underneath and back up to an adjacent plant. So we know that this sharing of nutrients, moisture, and even immune boosting compounds that the fungus tries to supercharge its host with, because the more healthy the host plant is, the more sugars it'll produce, and therefore the more healthy the fungal partner underground is going to be. So this whole wonderful network of sharing, some scientists have called the wood wide web, and that sounds kind of funny, but the reason that they're calling it a network like our World Wide Web is because these fungal threads, wherever they cross, they can fuse, because they're only one cell layer thick, and they can fuse, and they can fuse at alternate nodes all over the place. Just like our internet, we have all these nodes of information. Look how fast we Google something and we get the answer like that. It's not because there's one great big, data center in the sky and we all connect to that. We're connecting to all these nodes. It's just exactly what's happening underground. There are, nodes and nodes and nodes all underground. And so when something happens, it's really easy for an adjacent plant to know what happens, because the fungal threads have so many nodes like our internet underground. So it truly is a wood wide web happening underneath us. So I just wanted to show you, this is a kind of a creative, fun depiction of what it looks like for the body of the fungus underground, which are a whole system of mycelium or fungal threads, as opposed to the mushroom that they may put up that we see above ground. The mushroom is just the fruiting body, as I know, because you guys are you're all plant people, but a lot of people don't realize that the mushroom is the tiniest part of the whole fungus, and underground it can be a massive body of that fungus going out and possibly attaching to many plants. The photograph in the lower right shows some of these hyphae just all connected to a plant root, so you can see what that looks like. The mushroom is just a temporary fruiting body that the fungus can push forward if the soil is moist enough to actually push through it. We don't see a lot of mushrooms in the desert because it's so hard to push through if you're a mushroom, if you're a toadstool, to try to push up through this, really hard, dry, compacted soil. So we don't see a lot, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. um, I think I've already, mentioned the word. It's the relationship between a host plant and the mycelium of root parting fungi is called mycorrhizal. So mycorrhizal is actually a relationship, not a. You wouldn't say it is a mycorrhizal. No, it is a mycorrhizal fungus, and this relationship is it's really so consequential to plants, how important it is for them to have this relationship. On the left hand side is a picture I know we've all seen if we've looked anywhere on the internet about mycorrhizal fungi. This is from Dr. David Reed. He's from the Royal Society in England, and I swear he stole his kid's ant farm, dumped out the ants, put in a little pine sprout, and sprinkled some mycorrhizal fungi spores, and then watered the whole thing. He got the very first picture of what a plant root looks like with all of its attached fungi, because this is just a single little plate. So I love that. I don't know if his little kid cried when he stole her ant farm, but at any rate, it's a great picture. And I actually did write to him and asked him if I could use this image in my book, and he said yes. But everybody else on the internet has stolen it. You've seen this, I'm sure. If you look closely at that pine sprout, the root, only the orange little thin root is what is belonging to that pine root. There's like two vertical roots going down, maybe three orange roots. All the rest of that is fungal mycelium. So the mycelium can increase the absorbing area of that root by thousands of times. And in exchange for that extra surface area that the mycelium are going to go out and collect all the things from all of that soil, the plant is giving up maybe about 20% of its sugars. But when you see what that return on investment is, it's very impressive, because that plant is getting a lot more than just 20% back of all the absorbing nutrients and moisture that it can get from these huge networks of fungi when they are part of what I call the Root Partners Club. When you're part of the Root Partners Club, you get all kinds of benefits, and everybody wins. It's just great. One thing that, and I just want to mention too, that about 90% of all the plants on Earth have mycorrhizal relationships going. They have a partner in crime with all this, of having a symbiosis with fungi. But I do also want to make sure that you know, and probably a lot of you do because you're gardeners as well, the only place that mycelium grows on a plant is on the absorbing roots of that plant. Think about a tree. As the tree grows, all of the roots close to the trunk of that tree are going to become covered with bark. They get barked over. And those roots that are close to the tree trunk are only going to be for structure anymore. They are not going to be for absorbing things. The absorbing roots are going to be out underneath the drip line of that plant, not next to the plant. So when you see a fairy ring of mushrooms around a tree, you'll never see them right around the trunk. They're going to be most likely right under the drip line, because that's where the absorbing roots are, which all of us know. It probably drives you as crazy as me when you see somebody watering a tree at the trunk, and you know it's wasted water, and they're going to probably start causing root rot because that part of the tree can't absorb. Well, the fungus knows where the mycorrhizal partners know where those absorbing roots are, and that's the only place they're going to connect. So that's what you will see around the base of a tree that has a fairy ring. That's where the mycelium is going to be connected, and where if you do see mushrooms coming up, that's where you'll see them. So we actually have two main types of mycorrhizal fungi in the desert. There's both ectomycorrhizal and endomycorrhizal. The difference is ectomycorrhizal fungi grows around the outside of plant roots, and they actually put up mushrooms that you can see above the ground. The endomycorrhizal fungi grows inside of the plant roots, and they don't produce above ground mushrooms. What they do instead is produce spores underground, because there's so few times when they can actually push up through the ground because it's so dry and so hot. The only time they could ever do that is after a big rainstorm. So we do have about 90% of our desert plant species have partnerships with endomycorrhizal fungi. So when you walk across the desert, if you don't see a lot of mushrooms, it doesn't mean there's not a whole underground system of mycorrhizal activity. It just means that they can't even push up, so they're not even going to try it. So they're going to have a whole different way. So all of these spores that stay underground need a way to get up above the ground. In our desert areas, that is through the digging of gophers and mice and squirrels, pack rats, all that. And when they are doing that, they are bringing spores, mixing them all around so that they can fly around and reattach to a new host. So in other areas, there are endomycorrhizal fungi that I know that you know, because they come in little packets that are very aromatic, that can be smelled by pigs and dogs. So you know what they are: truffles. Truffles are another form of endomycorrhizal fungi, and their way to spread themselves is to smell like a pheromone that a mammal's going to dig up. So two different ways. And I just wanted to mention now that not all mushrooms are mycorrhizal. Not all mushrooms are connected to plants and have this living relationship. Some of them are saprophytes, which means that they eat dead material. And so they are not mycorrhizal at all. And examples of saprophytic mushrooms that we eat all the time are oyster mushrooms and maitake and lion's mane, shiitake and morels. Just so you know that's going on. Not all. Every time you see a mushroom, it's not necessarily a mycorrhizal fungus. So we've been below ground here for a while. I would just want to take a quick look above ground to make sure that we realize the difference between what's happening with the plant above ground and below ground. So above ground, in the sunlight, leaves are breathing in carbon dioxide, taking that out of the air in the light, combining it with the water and the carbon dioxide, making sugars, and all those sugars go down underground to the roots so that the roots can grow more and also feed their mycorrhizal hosts. But underground in the dark, those roots are breathing out carbon dioxide. So they can't photosynthesize in the dark, so they can't take in carbon dioxide, so they have to breathe out carbon dioxide. So what this is doing, these plants and every plant in our environment, is helping us with climate change, because they are taking carbon dioxide out of the air and they're putting it below ground as carbon underground, but it's getting stored in a couple of different cool ways. So when the sugars are going down through the plant roots, I'm depicting here a plant root, which is the kind of blue stain over here is the plant root And from the soil side, the very blue, dark blue fungal mycelium is entering the plant root. It's going inside the plant root. And there it is going to be slurping up some of those sugars. They're both underground, the plant root and the fungi. So they're both respiring. They're both breathing out carbon dioxide. They're breathing that out into a moist environment. So there's water, into an environment that has an abundance of calcium. Because we get so little rain, calcium builds up in the soil because it's not dissolved because we have so little rain. So there's an abundance of calcium, and the plants and the mycelium are both breathing out carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide plus calcium equals calcium carbonate, or caliche as we call it. So this calcium carbonate that is formed from a biological system is actually creating an inorganic little chunk, crystal at first, and then a chunk, and then possibly a layer of encapsulated, stored inorganic carbon underground for as long as we don't disturb it. So here is another microscopic look. And I got permission to use this from Dr. Michael Allen at UC Riverside. He actually got a photograph of the moment that carbon capture happens between a plant root and the mycelium going in. So on the left-hand side of your screen, the very pure white thing is the plant root. Coming out of that plant root in the middle, you see the fungus. It's actually going into it there. And the top little circle insert is where a fungus has gone into the root. They both have been breathing out carbon dioxide, and that is the start of a crystal of calcium carbonate. That's exactly where the whole thing starts. Now that can just keep happening until you get a bigger crystal, and then a chunk, and then maybe even a layer. And the layer can be at the surface, below the surface, all the way down to groundwater in some cases, or layers in between. You never know where a caliche layer is going to go. And if any of you have caliche in your yards, I say I'm so sorry, because it's hard to garden with it, but I just want you to know that you're contributing to the health of the planet by keeping carbon stored in your garden. So the results of this exhale underground is calcium carbonate, or caliche, and this partnership stores vast amounts of carbon underground for hundreds to thousands to actually even 100,000 years. It turns out that most of the caliche stored deep underground in our deserts was deposited there during the Pleistocene, when we had a much more dense and lush vegetation than we do today. But that will stay locked underground as long as we don't disturb that desert soil, because it only gets, if the calcium is dissolved, then it unhooks from the carbon dioxide, and the carbon dioxide can go back into the air, and the calcium will remain in the soil. I have a chunk of, let me see if I can get this up to where you can see it. Okay, I hope you can see that. So this is a chunk of caliche, and you can see it's kind of like cement. This piece was at the surface when we dug it up, so you can see how flat it is here. But it's going to stay like this. The carbon dioxide is going to be stored, or the carbon is going to be stored in here until and if it gets exposed to water. And then if I did pour my water on here, I would start dissolving the calcium, and it would be releasing the carbon dioxide. And that's what can happen whenever we actually disturb our desert soils. And that's why I am concerned about the industrial scale solar installations that are being built on intact desert soils instead of finding a place that is already impacted, where we have lost that caliche storage, and we've lost all the plants that would continue to fix new carbon and store it underground. So there's another pretty cool thing going on underground with mycorrhizal fungi, and it is the covering around each mycorrhizal thread of our most common plant pardoning fungi, which is the endomycorrhizal fungi. The covering around every single one of those threads, which can be, miles and miles and miles on every square foot of soil. The covering of each one of those is made out of carbon that was taken out of the air as carbon dioxide, turned into sugar, moved down to the roots, and redistributed around the threads of the mycelium as sort of a Thompson's water seal, semi-permeable living coating around the mycelium that actually keeps the water and nutrients from leaking out of the mycelial threads. The name of this is called, well, it's pronounced different ways. I like glomalin, but it seems like maybe it's glomalin or glomalin. I'm going to call it glomalin. You can correct me later, but I don't know. It's just one of those magic things. Even the scientists who finally isolated glomalin not that long ago, I think it was maybe 15 years ago, she said she had a really hard time not calling glomalin magic because of everything it does. So it is this leak-proof coating. On this screen, it's stained green so that you can see it's not just on the mycelium itself, but it's around the spores. And all of that is all throughout our soil wherever mycelium happens. So it's a glycoprotein full of carbon, and it is so prevalent around the world that it is thought to contribute about 1/3 of the world's soil carbon, which is so important to stabilize our whole climate. Underground, we have all of this organic carbon storage, besides all the inorganic carbon storage we're getting because of this exhale underground. So we have this glomalin that stabilizes the nutrients underground. It makes the aggregates hold together that farmers, treasure. It glues the soils together, is because it is like glue as well. And even after the mycelium dies, it is still gluing the soil together for many decades. So I wanted to see if this was really something real. I wanted to see if it was here in our yard. So I picked up a chunk of our soil, and I saw these little fungal threads holding big chunks. When I picked this up, I mean, what does that look like to you? Do you not see Avatar, the floating islands with these things hanging off? And the day I did this, the winds were about 15 to 20 miles an hour, and it's blowing all these little chunks, but that's holding them on. Those little threads, mycorrhizal threads, with that glomalin is just like glue holding all this together. And so it's, besides storing all that carbon, it's called one of the most important glues in the whole world. And even after that mycorrhizal thread dies, that's covered with glomalin, it can last for 30 to 100 years as soil glue inside, under the soil. So a pretty cool thing that a lot of people haven't even heard of. So the bottom line is, if we don't disturb our desert soils, all of these intricate systems keep working on an ongoing process. It's constantly replacing itself. It's keeping stored carbon for tens to hundreds to thousands of years, and all we have to do is leave it alone. All we have to do is not blade it up. The plants are capturing carbon, as it says here. The living crusts are preventing soil erosion and they're preventing dust. Those fungal root partners are storing carbon in glomalin. The roots themselves are storing organic carbon, and all the caliche underground is storing all of that carbon. So we have, above the soil, we have individual carbon sequestration units called plants that are sequestering carbon every day without our input, without us adding fertilizer, without us watering them. They are moving carbon down through the soil for hundreds to thousands of years, depending on how long an individual plant grows. And now we have proposals to blade thousands of acres of the desert to save us from ourselves, from fossil fuel use. And we're blading thousands and thousands of years old carbon sequestration units. And then we have to put all of that time and effort and fossil fuels back into the site to build it for what, maybe 30 years at the most for one of those things. And here we have these carbon sequestration units working for us for hundreds of thousands of years all on their own, if we leave it alone. So the sad thing is that most people just don't realize everything going on in desert soils. They look across a desert and see a sparse vegetation that's short, and they don't see much happening. And so they think, well, this isn't going to hurt if we take all this away. Nothing's really happening. And it couldn't be farther from the truth, And this is all wrapped around our desert soils, but the soils right where you are in your backyard have this happening as well. The more rainfall we get, the less caliche is stored because it is dissolving the calcium. But you still have all of these principles going on in your yard. They're more pronounced in the desert. And this is where all of our huge developments like industrial scale solar are going in. So that's where it's making a big difference. We're losing this gift from the desert without even knowing what we're doing. So just to summarize that, if you disturb the soil crust, the glue all breaks down, both in the biocrust and in the glomalin. You get the dust storms. These impacts are not just local, they're very widespread. And what really, to me, is kind of the really impactful thing about it is when plants are removed, the recovery just to the pre-disturbance cover, the percent cover on the ground, and the biomass that was there could take maybe 50 to 300 years for that. But the plants you took out were probably, for a California juniper, 2,000 years old, all the way up to maybe 10,000 years old for the creosote that you took out. That ecosystem recovery is going to take probably over 3,000 years for maybe something we did in the desert that isn't even going to last us maybe 30 years. So it's kind of sobering to think about. So the bottom line is, disturbed soils release carbon and intact soils sequester carbon. It's just kind of that easy. I wanted to mention something that if any of you are interested in delving any deeper in this, let's say because you're trying to be an advocate against some big development somewhere. I've been working for a number of years with, we were called the Inland Desert Working Group, and it's it's a group of nonprofits that all got together to work with California Natural Resource Agency and California Air Resources Board on the 30 by 30 plan to help. We were all trying to help the state with selecting the best places in California, the best 30% of those lands to try to conserve by the year 2030. And I ended up working on a 7-person science team to write a white paper for the state because they didn't get it. They didn't get caliche. We had to give numerous presentations to them to let them know what was happening. So we ended up writing a white paper that goes into much more detail. There are sections in it where I tried to summarize some of the heavy science so that lay people could read it, because we needed people to read this that aren't scientists, but we had to do it for scientists, so we had to put that in there. This is it has things in it that you might be able to use in your advocacy quiver, like the examples of appropriate utility scale solar sites. How much land is already pre-disturbed in California that could be used for large scale development without going into intact soils? If you are interested in that, just email me at robin@summertree.org and I will send you a digital copy of that for you to pull out whatever might help you in your battles. So, are we doing more damage than good by destroying the best carbon sink we have? I think we could do what we're doing a whole lot smarter. We could keep the intact desert going. We could be using fallow agriculture, maybe mining sites that have been abandoned, parking lots. There's so many other places that we can put big developments, and including industrial scale solar, that are not on intact desert soils. So we just all need to think about trying to steer development to repurposed soils and not intact desert soils. So the thing that it's just so easy how to do this is just leave our desert soils as intact as possible, because we've got these soil magicians that are working for us every day, and when we're doing nothing to fix that. So I just wanted to close with a couple of gardening insights, because if you love plants like I do, you probably all have a big garden. I do. I have a huge native plant garden, and I want you to know, not just on a landscape level about mycorrhizal relationships, but what about your own landscape and your own garden? So can you increase the amount of mycorrhizae that you have in your own garden? Yes, you can. The first golden rule is disturb your soil as little as possible. As soon as you start disturbing the soil, you start breaking down all of those intricate relationships that are all microscopic, but they're all happening there. The more you disturb the soil, the more you are going to ruin your sourdough starter. The mycorrhizal relationships are like having a sourdough starter in your soil working for you every day. The second thing you can do is, if you have any native plants in your yard at all, try to leave islands of native plants, if possible, that were already there before your soil or your land was developed, and your house was built. If you have any native plants, try to keep that little island there, because it serves as basically your sourdough starter kit. If you don't have that, but you're planting more native plants in your yard, and you wonder if they have the mycorrhizal partners underground, I would recommend that you go and collect and spread leaf litter from places that you can go. If you are in a chaparral environment, go out into chaparral, just take a little bag and scoop up some, like oak leaves or laurel sumac or lemonade berry, the leaves underneath. spread them around your plants. A little bit of the topsoil there too. Between the leaf litter and just a little bit of topsoil, there will be mycorrhizal spores there, and you can put some in your own yard.
We do have questions coming in.
Excuse me, what?
We do have a couple questions coming in, but I do want to wait until you're done, and we're getting close to our time. So
Okay, I just have like two more slides, but I'll go quickly. Okay, so I just want to say that go in the leaf litter. That's where you find a lot of these spores. And you can increase the mycorrhizae in your yard by encouraging your earthworms. Worm castings have high concentrations of mycorrhizae. Earthworms, some people call the intestines of the soil. So yes, get earthworms, you will get more mycorrhizae. And you can buy mycorrhizal packages and spread them. It's hard to say how effective those will be because I don't know what plant community they're getting them from. If you can get, your own habitat that you're doing in your yard, go to that habitat and collect some leaf litter and a little bit of soil, you can probably have, better success. But you can try these because these are probably broad spectrum cast of characters in there, and hopefully there will be some that like yours. And just to remember that mycorrhizae can be killed, the spores can be killed by sunlight, so always cover up your spores with soil when you put them on. Some nurseries are starting to inoculate their potted nursery plants with mycorrhizae. If they do, ask your nursery if they do that, and if they don't, encourage them to do that. And just a note that not all plants respond to mycorrhizae. The ones that don't are mustards and Chenopodiaceae, all the pigweeds, and some buckwheat species. So don't worry about putting mycorrhizae on these plants. Beets, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage or kale, cauliflower, collard greens, mustard, spinach, and blueberry and cranberry, because they don't play the game. They don't care about the Root Partners Club. So this is just a picture of a fairy ring around a pinyon pine, and you can see how it's all growing in a circle. That tells you exactly where the active roots are on your tree, so that's where to water. So that's the tour for you, and the take home I hope you get is that one of the biggest contributors to soil stability in our deserts are the smallest of organisms. And those little tiny organisms are what are holding all of our vast desert landscapes together. And I think if more people understood that, they'd be able to protect it. I do have a lot of this material in my book called The Desert Underground. If you're interested, you can go to our SummerTree website and order a copy. So thank you for hanging in there underground with me. So are there any questions?
we do have a couple of questions, and the first one is, why are some mushrooms poisonous?
Well, the mushrooms that are poisonous are trying to prevent being totally eaten by herbivores when they pop above the ground. So that is their way to keep from just being totally eaten and ingested. Other ones that are edible, I don't know how they all survive, because mushroom foraging is such a big deal and we eat so many. But I would say ecologically, the poisonous ones was just a way that maybe in the habitat that they were evolved in, there were animals that would eat them totally. That's my.
And then another question that we have quite a few questions for you. So the next question is, are there alternatives, or what alternatives do you recommend to hand pulling invasive grasses in between native wildflowers?
Oh, this is such a big deal. I just have to say there's a slight bit of hope. A tortoise biologist I've known since college, his name is Tim Shields, and he started doing tortoise surveys with Dr. Christine Berry. We were both working at BLM, and he's still doing those today. I just saw him at the farmer's market in Joshua Tree 2 weeks ago, and he said he has developed a light with the spectrum of light that will kill Schismus barbatus right in the ground, the seeds and the plant. I got so excited. He said, but the downside is it kills wildflowers too. So he's working on this. And I said, Tim, if you do this for the home gardener, you're going to be the richest person on the planet. Because this year there's Schismus barbatus, a Mediterranean grass, everywhere like nobody has ever seen it before. So he's trying to figure out if he can develop, those kind of robots that look like funny dogs. He's trying to figure out if he can put the light on that and try to have AI discern a big patch of schismus, Mediterranean grass from wildflowers, and see if they can flash the light as this robot thing is going now. Because the poor tortoises, they don't even have enough wildflowers now. They're forced to eat schismus, and they are very selective in what they eat. They are eating, like, specifically lotus and lupins and things that they need to excrete excess, say, potassium and stuff like that. If they're forced to eat schismus, they're not going to be able to excrete the stuff that they have to excrete for their metabolism to work correctly. So he's really trying to figure that out. Now, I know that that's like not right now for you guys. I have a informational business. It's called powerofplants.com. And on there I have one of my lead articles this month is about different methods of weeding and which ones I like and which ones I don't like and why and how to do it and everything. Because my husband says I should have a a button made with a hoe and a big X across it, because we should never be hoeing our weeds. We need to get them while they're still green before they turn tan and drop their seeds. As far as wildflowers, that's what I'm saying. It's so hard. I think the only thing you can do is hand pull them in between the wildflowers.
One final question in the room here.
Hi, Robin.
Okay.
And I'm sure you have been battling kidneys, and how horrible would it be for a water baron to release an excessive amount of water underground there, and how much carbon would be released, you think?
I couldn't hear your question clearly. Could somebody repeat it for me?
She's asking about the Cadiz water project.
Cadiz water.
Cadiz. Oh, there's nothing that's good about Cadiz. I mean, not for bighorn, not for the deep-rooted plants, because it's gonna drop the water table. And but I sorry, I really didn't hear the question, so I'm not sure how to answer.
She's interested in understanding how much carbon would be released if the water was released underground.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Great question. I have to say, I've been working with a scientist at Jet Propulsion Lab for about 3 years, Carmen Blackwell, and I finally convinced her that we need to have more studies about the buried inorganic carbon, and also how carbon in the water cycle underground in the aquifer is affecting us. And so we put together a proposal for the Keck Institute of Space Science, and we just got it approved a couple weeks ago. We will have a panel of scientists from around the United States that'll be meeting at Caltech in December, and we are going to be determining the technology needed to measure buried carbon both in caliche and in the aquifer, and how that is going to be affected by things like Cadiz, taking all the water out, and how that's going to, or even adding water and dissolving the calcium, and at what depths does that occur? At what depths of soil moisture does the calcium get unlinked from the carbon, so that the carbon release, I can't tell you that. I'm so sorry. We're going to have this whole new Keck Institute of Space Studies, panel to design what we need, and then hopefully each of the different institutions that come to this in December will together and separately research this problem, because it's huge. I'm sorry I can't give you any myself. I can't give you any specifics on that, but we're working on it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Robin. We have to wrap